It's official. The government is shut down. The Dems, they had a proposal to fund the government until October 31st, but their version had provisions to permanently extend enhanced ACA health insurance premium subsidies and restore nearly $1 trillion in Medicaid cuts. But that got shut down with no Republicans voting for it. Right, and then Senate Dems voted against a GOP bill to keep the government funded at the current levels for a few more weeks until a long-term spending deal could be reached. With that getting a vote of 55 to 45, though of course that failed to break the 60-vote filibuster. And it also was an entire side for, entire side against, though it was very close. Where you had 3 Democrats joining Republicans and voting in favor of the legislation and 1 Republican voting against. And all of this, it kind of felt inevitable. Because, well, there's often a lot of back and forth and everyone's concerned about the government shutting down. Like, especially here, it seemed like neither side was going to give in to demands. Because, well, Democrats, they said, we're not going to support any legislation that doesn't roll back Medicaid cuts and extend key Obamacare subsidies. You also had Republicans refusing to negotiate or make concessions. And so now with the shutdown actually happening, we've seen both sides continuing to point fingers at one another. And, while this blame game thing is pretty common, this time it is also a bit different, right? You have experts noting that we're witnessing the Trump administration do things that they've never seen before. Right? We've seen numerous agencies and their leaders joining in on the blame game and using official channels funded by taxpayer dollars to do so. And maybe one of the most notable examples was the Department of Housing and Urban Development, right, which currently has a massive banner on the homepage of their official government website that reads, "The radical left in Congress shut down the government. HUD will use available resources to help Americans in need." And that was also echoed in public statements from other agencies, like the Department of Veterans Affairs also issuing a partisan statement ahead of the shutdown saying, "Radical liberals in Congress are trying to shut down the government to achieve their crazy fantasy of open borders, transgender for everybody, and men competing in women's sports." Right, and that, as you had DHS Secretary Kristi Noem writing, "The Democrats will be forcing over 150,000 officers and nearly 50,000 members of the military, our front line of defense, to continue protecting our nation without pay." And it's also been widely reported that employees across numerous departments have received various iterations of an email from the White House Office of Management and Budget saying that a shutdown would be the fault of congressional Democrats. Right, and me saying this to you, you're probably like, okay, I'm not surprised, but it is a standout thing. Executive agencies and their leaders, they're usually not sharing these kinds of partisan messages. And in addition to ethics experts saying they've never seen anything like this, many have also argued that both the public statements and the internal communications appear to run up against federal lobbying laws and may even violate the Hatch Act, right, a federal statute that limits the political activities of federal employees and bans civil servants in the executive branch from engaging in most political activity while on duty. And so that it's its own messy battle. It's kind of just playing out on its own. But also, as far as how Trump himself has responded, the president, at least as of recording, has been unusually quiet. But he really hasn't given any kind of public comment or even made one of his kind of all caps posts on Truth Social. But there are plenty of people doing the job for him. Right? The official White House X account, it's been going balls to the walls, putting out tons of posts blaming Democrats for the shutdown, mocking Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, and repeating the false claim pushed by many Republicans that Democrats are the ones that block the Republican bill because they want to give free health care to illegal immigrants. Right? And you also had J.D. Vance going on the offensive and echoing those narratives in an interview with Fox and Friends this morning.
But let's step back for a second, because I think it's important for the American people to realize that the far left faction of Senate Democrats shut down the government because we wouldn't give them hundreds of billions of dollars for health care benefits for illegal aliens. It's actually not even all Senate Democrats. This is basically Chuck Schumer. Chuck Schumer, he's worried he's going to get a primary challenge from AOC, and so he's shutting down the people's government to give in to sort of the left-wing coalition in their party. And it's craziness, and people are going to suffer because of it.
Now, of course, like we talked about, his claim that Democrats want to give billions of dollars in healthcare to illegal immigrants, it's just simply untrue. Right? Illegal immigrants are ineligible for federal healthcare programs and Obamacare subsidies, and Democrats aren't trying to change that. Right? At most, one of the things that Democrats are trying to do is restore a subsidy for certain lawfully present immigrants that Republicans cut in their tax bill. But then also, beyond that, you had AOC herself hitting back at Republican attempts to somehow blame her for the shutdown.
And I saw some Republican members of Congress saying, oh, well, if we have this shutdown, it's because of AOC. Well, if that's the case, my office is open and you are free to walk in and negotiate with me directly. Because what I'm not going to do is tolerate 4 million uninsured Americans because Donald Trump decided one day that he wants to just make sure that kids are dying because they don't have access to insurance. That's what's not going to happen. And so if those senators think that we're having a shutdown because of me, they're free to enter my office and negotiate, because what we're not going to do is allow all of millions of people in this country to not be able to afford their insulin and their chemotherapies.
You're also seeing Schumer out there defending his decision to lead his party into the shutdown, arguing that this is about a fight for healthcare. And with that, you had Schumer saying it's the Republicans' fault that we're in a shutdown now. So you have him calling it Donald Trump's government shutdown and saying that it's the Republicans refusing to protect Americans' healthcare. With him adding in another post, healthcare premiums across the country are doubling and Republicans shut down the government instead of fixing it. Right? And so that's a point that we've seen many other Democrats also making, right? Arguing that they don't trust that Republicans will actually negotiate negotiate with them in good faith if they agreed to the stopgap bill. So they need to make their all or nothing stand now. And with that, they claim that it's evidenced by the fact that Republicans refused to even negotiate with them before trying to pass this bill. And because of that, Republicans are the ones responsible for the shutdown. And you also had California Governor Gavin Newsom honing in on reports that construction on Trump's new White House ballroom is going to continue amid the shutdown, with Newsom's press office saying, Trump, Marie Antoinette says, no health care for you, peasants, but a ballroom for the Queen. We're basically saying he cares more about his ballroom than Americans, though according to the White House, this project is being funded by private donors. But for now, who really knows what's going to happen? Right? It's unclear how lawmakers are intending to get out of this hole and end the shutdown. I mean, today you had Republican leaders in the Senate forcing another vote on the same exact stopgap measure that failed to pass yesterday, and wouldn't you know it, it failed again. Same votes, nothing changed. And so for now, there's two kind of main battles that are playing out. One is going to be who the public blames here and how that might affect the midterms, even though that's still so far away. And two, while the government is shut down, what sort of impact do we see? Right, on agencies, on their workers, and the services that they provide. Right, especially because we know that Trump has said that he wants to use a shutdown to fire federal workers instead of furloughing them like usual during a shutdown. And yesterday, it appeared that he said he'd even target Democrats specifically.
When you shut it down, you have to do layoffs. So we'd be laying off a lot of people that are going to be very affected, and the Democrats, they're going to be Democrats.
Now today you had a reporter asking Vance about those comments, and he responded,
We're not targeting federal agencies based on politics. We're targeting the people's government so that as much as possible of the essential services can continue to function. Let's be honest. If this thing drags on for another few days or God forbid another few weeks, we are going to have to lay people off. We're going to have to save money in some places so the essential services don't get turned off in other places.
But also at the same press conference, you had Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt seemingly contradicting Vance's claim that there would only be layoffs if the shutdown dragged on.
Unfortunately, because the Democrats shut down the government, the president has directed his cabinet, and the Office of Management and Budget is working with agencies across the board to identify where cuts can be made, and we believe that layoffs are imminent. They are, unfortunately, a consequence of this government shutdown.
So this is a very fluid situation. It's one that's going to change as the shutdown drags on. And for now, I'd really love to know your thoughts, opinions, and reactions.